everyone. Welcome to chapter 12. We're getting close to the end of the semester. So what we're going to do today is we're going to stay talking about corrections, and we're actually going to move on and talk about prison life. So we talked about probation and alternative sentencing forms, alternative intermediate sanctions in chapter 10 of chapter 11. We talked about the history of prisons, and then we talked about current prisons and jails. And so now today we're going to talk about actual prison life. What is it like to be in a prison, some of the issues dealing with prisons. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So I will share my PowerPoint. Hopefully you can see it. So just a little quote that you can start thinking about prison life. So that's what we're going to talk about. What is it actually like to be in a prison system? Okay. So just to get you thinking about it, I have this little scenario. Mike and his sister, Michelle, committed several bank robberies. After they were caught, tried, and convicted, the judge sentenced them to 25 to 50 years in a maximum security prison. Their sentence hearing occurred 2 years ago. Recently, they exchanged their first letters describing their lives in prison. What do you think each of them had to say? So just think about it. If you were in prison for 2 years, how would you describe what your life had been for those 2 years? Think about like the physical condition of the prison. What would that be like? What things were provided by the prison? What are your social realities? Do you have friends? What do you do on a day-to-day basis? What are your activities? So if you had to describe what you think it would be like over those 2 years, how would you describe it? Well, hopefully that gets you into thinking about prison life. When you're thinking about those things, one of the things you want to think about is what would be the hardest thing to give up if you were stuck in prison for a long period of time? What would be the hardest thing for you to give up? Choosing your food for dinner, like you just get what they give you every day. So how would that feel? Wearing contact lenses, if you wear contact lenses, using hair gel. Quiet when you're sleeping. It's always very loud in a prison. The human touch, you don't really have a lot of affection when you're in prison. Going to the bathroom alone, your bathroom, your toilet, everything is right there in your cell. Driving a car, no cell phone, no computer, no digital devices at all. So what would be the hardest thing for you to give up in that setting? Well, what I want you to do now is think about what would be the typical male inmate. If you had to describe the typical male inmate, kind of jot down what you think would be the characteristics of that typical male inmate. So you can stop the video, kind of list what you think would be the average ethnicity or race. What would be the average age, marital status, gender, educational level. What about their alcohol or drug use? What types of crimes do you think that they're in there for? What's the typical crime? And what's the average sentence length for the average male inmate? So once you have that description written down, then we'll move on and you can compare your description with what is reality and see if you picked the right things. Okay, so here we go. So the typical male inmate is generally male, obviously. Mostly inmates in jail are male. The female population is growing, but mostly male. It is also mostly Black, okay? Whites are increasing. Now whites are up to 35% of the prison population, but they make up a vast majority of the overall population. So Blacks and here minorities make up a large portion of correctional facilities, even though they make up a smaller percentage of overall society. So we have to think about that. What about the typical age of a male inmate? Well, the average age is going to be around 33 years old. Okay, because you have to think about, even if they committed a crime in their 20s, which is the age most people commit crimes, or even early 30s, their sentences are usually longer if they're in a prison. So they're going to be there for a while. So that's what makes the average age around 33. 9% are over 50 years old. So there are some that even have a long enough sentence that they're there all the way into their 50s. Being 50 and older creates its own set of issues that we'll also talk about this week. Now, what about the typical crimes that these inmates commit? Generally, you're talking about violent crimes. So 5 out of 10 are these violent crimes. And that's what you would think of, especially for longer sentences, that they're going to be in there for these violent crimes. But there are lots and lots and lots of people in prison for drug offenses. 1 out of 5 is there for some sort of a drug offense. Typically, it's more for a more serious drug offense, like a trafficking or selling or distribution. But there are lots and lots of people in prison for drug offenses. That's one of the major sort of changes in the system, that they're trying to get the non-violent drug offenders out of the prison system and get them somewhere else for treatment or some sort of different facility. That's a reform, one of the big reforms. We know less than 1 out of 3 are property or other crimes. So the majority, as you can see, are violent crimes or drug offenses. They make up the majority of people that are in prison. Now, what about the average educational level for the typical male inmate? What do you think about that? Well, we know that they have very little education. In general, people in prison have very little education. A lot of times they have not even graduated high school and 0 college. So we know that 70% have no high school diploma or GED. So they don't have anything even from high school. We know the typical sentence for a male inmate is, what do you think, how long it is? Is average around 8 years. Okay, so now that's averaging everybody, people that have life and then people have shorter sentences, but the average age of, the average length of a sentence for somebody is around 8 years. We do know there's about 9% that have life sentences. So there are people that are going to be there until the day that they die. It's a relatively small number. And so we have to remember, as a society, the majority of people that are in prisons are eventually going to get out of prison. Only a very small percentage actually stay there for their whole life. So we talk about prison programs and activities and things that they can do while they're in prison. We have to understand that they are going to get out. So maybe we need to provide some rehabilitation when they do get out and are reintegrated into society. How do we want them to be? We know 1 in 3 receive some sort of an additional sentence. So they already are sentenced once for some crime, and then they may receive an additional sentence. So 1 in 4 are on parole, and then they violate their parole, so they have an additional sentence. 1 in 5 on probation, they get an additional sentence. And then 1% had escaped from confinement, so they have an additional sentence placed on their overall sentence. So it's not always just one offense, they serve it and they get out. A lot of times they have additional crimes that are committed in the facility or right before or after they're out of the facility, and then they get sent right back with additional sentencing. We also know that 1 out of 4 serve some time in a juvenile facility. So one of the things we know is often when juveniles start delinquency or committing crimes when they're young, which is delinquency, that they have a greater chance of continuing to commit these offenses as they get older. So that is always an issue. If we can try to decrease juvenile delinquency, the hope is then we decrease overall adult crime also. Now, what about their marital status? Do you think most inmates are married? Only about 1 in 6 are married. So very few are married. More of them were married. Very few stay married once they're in the facility. Okay. So a lot of them, some of them have never married. 6 out of 10 have never married, but a lot of them are separated, divorced, or widowed. So even if they were married originally, they tend to not stay married, especially if they have a significantly longer sentence. What about alcohol and drug use? Well, typically 4 out of 10 report at least drinking 1/5 of liquor in a single day. So 1/5 of liquor are those bottles that are about that big, and drinking that in an entire day, binge drinking. So we know that drugs and alcohol often are directly related to crimes. I've heard different district attorneys say over the years that there's no crimes anymore that aren't committed that don't have something to do with drug or alcohol. And a lot of them have binge drinking, severe alcohol or drug use. More than 8 in 10 report that they have used illegal drugs in their lifetime. So most people that are in prison have used drugs at some point in their lifetime. 1 in 3 report using drugs at the time of the offense. Again, almost all crimes are somehow linked to alcohol or drug use. More than 3 in 10 are under the influence of alcohol at the time they commit their crime. So lots of them were drunk when they committed the crime. Alcoholism and drug abuse is very widespread among the male prisoners, and most have participated in some sort of alcohol or drug treatment program while they were on under the supervision of a correctional facility. Now, so that is what your typical male inmate is. So you kind of have that picture in your mind. We need to talk about a couple of other things when we're talking about prison life. So the first thing is a prison is what we call a total institution. That means every single aspect of their life is controlled in some ways. It's an enclosed facility. It's isolated from society, separated from society, both physically, walls, and socially. There's not a lot of interaction between the people in the facility and outside the facility. So that means the people in the facility share their lives together, just them. So you have a group of people that have committed crimes and they share their life. Oftentimes they create their own subculture, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And because they don't have any influences necessarily from outside society, they kind of start to share the common values and beliefs and morals of the other people within that institution. And that's what we call prisonization. You may go in there not a hardened criminal, but when you spend your whole life in this subculture of hardened criminals, you may become more of a hardened criminal because of the subculture that you're surrounded by in this total institution. So obviously prisons are total institutions. There are other things that have over the years been called total institutions. Concentration camps for total institutions, mental hospitals are total institutions, prisons, seminaries. So those things are what we call total institution. And the people in those institutions sort of form their own subculture. Now, let's look at that subculture. Let's talk about the male inmate world. So when you're in that total institution, what is that subculture that you're getting prisonized to? So the first thing I want to talk about is the rules that govern, or the social structure that governs that subculture. When you're talking about prison subculture, there's two different things. There's the formal or official subculture. Those are the rules and policies and procedures created by the institution. So when an inmate is booked into prison, they're given a code of conduct handbook. These are the rules you have to follow. You have to do certain behaviors, follow certain rules while you're in the facility. And if you don't follow those official rules, then you're going to be written up. You're going to receive additional punishment. You may even be brought to court for additional charges. So you can't have certain things in your cell. You're not allowed to have possession of certain things. You're not allowed to have cell phones and things like that. So those behaviors, you have to go certain places at certain times. You can't treat the guards certain ways. So those are all the formal or official rules. What also exists in these prisons, though, is this informal or unofficial sort of subculture. This is the subculture that is created by the inmates themselves. Again, they're in this total institution. They're all together. So they start to share values and behaviors and beliefs among themselves as inmates. And this is what has been come to be known as the prison subculture. So what are some of these rules of this prison subculture? Well, there's lots of rules, but these are kind of like the 5 main ones. Don't interfere with other inmates' interests, right? So if they have business interests, if they're doing something, just don't interfere and don't rat. Don't ever tell on other inmates, okay? Play it cool, do your time. Don't be a troublemaker. Don't be, in everybody's face. Don't whine, be a man. If you get punished, just accept your punishment. Don't exploit other inmates. So although they have this it's kind of ironic because they're in jail because they committed a crime. They do sort of follow this sort of code of morality. They don't really like necessarily when other people exploit or take advantage of other people. So if you give your word to somebody, if you tell them you're going to do something, you need to follow through with your word. It is very important. And then don't ever be a sucker and don't start trusting the guards. The inmates are a subculture, the guards are separate. You're not going to intermix with those two things. So I have posted a video. It's really interesting. You can watch. It's only one segment. There's lots of segments to it, but I just posted one. But it gives you kind of an overview. It really gives you an insight to what prison life is like within the facility. So you can click on the link or you can look at the materials and you can watch it. Another aspect of the prison subculture are what we call prison argot. Prison argot are specific words that mean something. So they come up with their own words to mean something, their own language within the facility. So these are just a few. So see if you can guess what each of these are. So you could stop the video, try to guess, and then we'll kind of go over them. So I wonder if you had any of them. So I probably would not. I know one of them. Two of them I would have maybe known. Okay, so ace deuce. Ace deuce is your best friend. A banger is a knife. A billy is a white man. A boneyard is a conjugal visit. So you have a family member come to visit you and you get to spend the night with them. That's a boneyard. A rat is a informer, somebody that talks with the guards and tells on people. A chester is a child molester. A dog is your friend. Ink is a tattoo. A man walking is a guard is coming. And a tree jumper is a rapist. So those are just some of the different words that you see within the prison subculture. Now, when you talk about prison subculture, there's different theories of how this subculture develops. There's the deprivation model theory and there's the importation model theory. The deprivation model theory says that these subcultures form because we are isolating inmates and sticking them together and not letting them socialize outside. So it's kind of leading to these depraved morals and values, okay? So they develop those certain morals and values because of being deprived of everything else in society. The other view is what we call the importation model. The importation model is no. These values and goals exist outside and they're just bringing them into the facility. They're just carrying in their learned behaviors, goals, values into the facility and then recreating that subculture within the facility. There's really not a right or wrong answer to this. There's different theories and it may be a mix of both. But these are the different theories of how this subculture actually develops in the first place. What do you think? Which one do you think is stronger? Just a guess. They're theories, right? Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about are inmate types. So these are very much stereotypes. They're not set in stone. People don't fit perfectly in these. But it's really interesting to talk about the inmate types because it gives you sort of an overall picture of the different types of people that are in prison. So again, they're stereotypes, they don't fit perfectly, but it gives you kind of an overview of the different types of subcultures that exist within the facility. So these are the different subtypes or subcultures that exist within the facility. So mean dude. The mean dude is a very violent, quick to fight, very angry. You often want to just leave these people alone. You don't want to cross them. They are just crazy, mean, fight a lot, spend a lot of time in solitary confinement because they violate a lot of the rules. They're the troublemakers. They're most likely going to be found in maximum security prisons. They often have been in prison before and played this role in prison before. A lot of times, these are what you would consider as the psychopathic or psychotic sort of inmates within the facility. Hedonist. A hedonist builds their life around any pleasure that they could possibly find within the prison setting. So they might be involved in smuggling or gambling or drug running, or homosexual activity. They may not even be homosexual, but they're looking for some pleasure while they're in the facility. So they would engage in that behavior. They're looking for here and now pleasure. They're not thinking about the future. They're just trying to figure what joy they can get at this moment within the facility. An opportunist. An opportunist is somebody that's going to take advantage of any of the positive aspects of prison. So if they're offering GED courses, they're going to take it. If they're offering education, college courses, anything like that, they're going to take it. Counseling, trade schools, employment opportunities, anything that they can do, they are going to take advantage within that facility. Or a treatist. A treatist is somebody that psychologically is having a hard time dealing with the psychology of the prison subculture. So they are going to isolate themselves from the rest of the inmates. A lot of times they become heavily involved in drugs and alcohol because they just want to escape the realities of where they are. Sometimes they suffer from very bad psychological or neurologic disorders. So sometimes you might have them be in the mental portion of the hospital, severe depression, severe mental illness a lot of times. Then you have the legalist. The legalist is your jailhouse lawyer. These are the people that are going to spend significant time in the law library, trying to learn the law, figuring out how to appeal their case. Sometimes they become so well versed in the law that other inmates come to them and ask them for legal advice and legal help with their particular cases. So a lot of times they're facing a very long sentence and they're trying to find any legal means that they can to try to reduce their sentence. A radical. A radical is somebody that believes that they're only in prison because of political issues or they're being suppressed by society or by the government. They are the oppressed by the government. The government is oppressing them. So they are very vocal against their confinement. They're not conformists. They view the rest of the world as against them. They often can engage in more criminal activity to try to escape the oppressor, which they would say is the government. So they often don't conform. And they often do not receive any sympathy from the correctional officers because they're often troublemakers. Colonist. A colonist is somebody that's there for a very, very long time and views it at prison as their home. They almost don't even remember what life is like outside the facility. They become accustomed to the routine and the structure of the prison sentence. A lot of times they hold a higher position of power because they've just been there, and respect because they've just been there for so long. They know the ropes, they know the rules, they follow the rules. And a lot of times colonists, when they are released back into society, don't know how to live in regular society. They've spent so much of their life in this facility, they have a hard time readjusting to society outside. Religious. Religious are the people, the inmates that have very, very strong religious ties. They may believe that they're born again, and so that God is reforming them. They often attend a lot of religious services, prayer groups, lead religious groups, strong religious beliefs. They may have specific dietary needs that they have to follow with their religion. They're very strict to their religion. Oftentimes correctional officers view them as suspicious in the sense that they think it's just an act that they're putting on. But this is a group of people, and some are truly reformed and really do become religious. Realist. Realists just are people that realize they committed a crime, accept their fate, accept their sentence, and are just trying to get through the best that they can. They understand it is a natural consequence of them choosing to engage in criminal activity. So they're just doing their time. They're just there to do their time. They follow the inmate code. They follow the formal code. They're just there trying to get through, stoic attitude, pushing through so they can get out of prison. And then the last one is what we would call the gangbangers. These are people that are associated with gangs. This is the largest or fastest growing group. Gangs are a huge part of prison life at this point. They often have significant signs or tattoos or hand signals or colors that represent the gangs that they are part of. They oftentimes are involved in criminal activity within the prison. It could be hedonistic drug activities and things like that, or violent crime within the prison. So those are the different subcultures. Again, they're just stereotypes. Nobody fits them perfectly, but it's interesting to think about all of the different people that would make up the prison subculture. So let's see how you do. So these are the different subculture. These are statements. Write down which subculture you think each of these would fit into. So you can stop the video, see if you can fit them, and then we'll go over them. So hopefully you did it. So let's see. I have accepted God into my heart. Religious. Do you have any drugs or pornography I can buy? Hedonist. If they let me out, I will commit another crime to return. Colonist. Watch your step. I'll beat you if you look at me again. Mean dude. What educational programs does this facility offer? Opportunist. This is a government ploy to suppress the Black man. This is radical. I need to work on my appeal in the law library. Legalist. Dude, keep your head down and do your time. Realist. Can you deliver drugs to my cell? I never leave. Retreatist. If you want our protection, you must complete the initiation. Gangbanger. So hopefully you see all of those different types. So that is your discussion for this week. You're going to choose a prison subculture and you're going to write a letter as if you were that subculture. So you're going to go to the discussion, write a letter. It doesn't have to be super long. Assume one of these subcultures, write a letter from that perspective. And then once you write your letter, you're going to read other people's letters and try to guess which subculture they were writing the letter from. So you can be creative, you can have fun. If you want to use a swear word, you can use a swear word. People sometimes want to do that. So, make it realistic towards your subculture, and then we'll see which subculture that people wrote about, and you can try to guess. Okay, so that's all I have for the first lecture, and then we will move on to the second part for this week. See you soon.